Welcome to the Queen's Court, where growth has a cost, where healing changes everything, and where the woman you're becoming requires you to let go of who you used to be. This season, we're talking about elevation, choosing yourself, outgrowing what no longer fits, and moving like you've already decided. Because you're not her anymore. This is the Queen's Court.
So welcome back to the Queen's Court, a space curated for women by women where faith, sisterhood, and real conversations meet. I'm your host, Nisi Ford, and tonight's episode, I've titled this, Rest is Part of the Strategy. So I want to talk about fatigue, more so mental fatigue. So last week I went on a cruise and I was away from work for 5 days. So when I say that I was so disconnected, meaning there was no emails, no meetings, no alarm clock waking me up, early in the morning, no responsibilities pulling me 50 million directions. I was completely cut off from everything. So we went on a Carnival cruise, and while on the ship, as we had a balcony view, so I was sitting out on the balcony looking out at the ocean and watching the waves and the water and the waves, and just admiring the stillness. And at that moment, I realized, that I was tired. And I'm not talking about physically tired, but mentally and emotionally tired, like completely drained. And I also wasn't surprised that I was. I was surprised, though, that I didn't realize how tired I was until I actually stopped moving. I think that that's a lot of us. We're all walking around like completely exhausted and don't even realize it because we're so used to carrying things that we don't even recognize the weight or how heavy the things are that we're carrying. We have the same routines. We wake up in the morning, we go to work, we take care of the family, we show up at church, we answer questions, we respond to emails and text messages, we attend meetings, we go to bed, and then we wake up and we do it all over again. We're not doing it because we're super women. We're doing it because that's just what we're used to doing. We're functioning. Somewhere along the way, we've all learned how to survive on empty and just keep going. But what we didn't learn is how to recognize when we're running out of fuel. So on the outside, we look like we're functioning just fine. But inside, though, we're running on fumes. I've always worked in corporate America, and I've had friends and family members who have always, had factory jobs or assembly line jobs. And I've always debated with them, and I will still continue to debate with them to this day, how mental fatigue, in my opinion, is worse than physical fatigue. I remember after a long day's work, I would come home and I'd be like, man, I am so tired. And the first thing they would say is, you ain't even do nothing. Just because they've been on, working on these assembly lines all day. But when you're physically tired, the signs are obvious. Your body hurts, you're sleepy, your energy is low. And we typically say things like, I'm tired, or I'm going to go lay down for a minute so that I can relax or rest, or I'm just going to sit down for a second, rest my legs, whatever the case may be. Mental fatigue, though, is trickier. When you're mentally exhausted, you still show up. So I had to Google some of the signs of mental fatigue and what that could look like or be disguised as. And some of the things that they had listed was, struggling to concentrate, feeling emotionally numb, becoming irritated over small things, forgetting details you wouldn't normally forget, lack of motivation, feeling overwhelmed by tasks that are usually that come easy to you, and losing interest in things that you enjoy. I felt the losing interest in the things that you enjoy because I know several years ago I was in a state of exhaustion and I lost interest in everything that I loved, meaning writing, poetry, reading, those things. I didn't have an interest in doing any of those. And it was because I was mentally fatigued. What the other thing that I found interesting is that it stated that mental fatigue often becomes physical fatigue because the mind and the body aren't separate systems. So when you've been carrying stress and pressure, responsibility, grief, expectations, etc. When you've been carrying these things for months and months on end, eventually our body starts waving a white flag too. So when I got on this ship and I stopped, it was like both my body and my mind was like, girl, thank you. We've been telling you that we was tired, like thanks for stopping. So again, rest is part of the strategy. And it fits perfectly with season 2 of the Queen's Court, where we're talking about elevation, expansion, and evolution. Because many people think that when we talk about growth, we're talking about doing more or going harder, and that's not the case. So the first question that I have for you is, what if the reason you can't hear your next instruction is because you're too exhausted to listen? One of the biggest dangers of fatigue, especially mental fatigue, is that you don't stop to recognize, how impaired we are. In my younger days, I remember going out to the club and used to visit this club called Caddy's, and I would drink. We would drink until we was drunk, and then we would drive home. And I would always be the driver, and I would always say that I drove better when I was intoxicated. How crazy is that, right? But I would, and my friends would agree. So I guess they were as insane as I was. But what I didn't realize is that, yeah, I may have started out that way, driving fine from Old Shelbyville Road, wherever it was, to the West End. But the longer I drove, the more impaired my senses were, especially my reaction and my decision making. They were delayed. And that's the same way when you're mentally fatigued. So they say that we make poor decisions when you're exhausted. You tend to make short term decisions instead of wise ones. We have more accidents and errors because fatigue affects our concentration and, again, our reaction time. Emotional burnout, you find yourself snapping at people, crying more easily, feeling detached, and losing patience. And it says that you're mentally exhausted. Your emotional reserve gets depleted, and things that don't or wouldn't normally bother you start getting on your last nerve. So that's including people that you could have probably tolerated for an additional hour or two. But now it's like you pushing it, like you're really pushing it. And when we look at the physical consequences, you have to think about things like high blood pressure, weakened immune systems, headaches, digestive issues, loss of joy, because they say that people, they stop enjoying life because now they're just surviving, and high achievers. And I know that I've fail or fall into this category. And they say that high achievers often mistake exhaustion for commitment and that we wear fatigue like a badge of honor. And I can definitely relate to that. And if you are one of the, a high achiever as well, how many times have you told yourself, I'll rest after I finish this load of laundry, but you've been doing a million and 10 other things all day long, or I'll rest after this project, or, for me, I'll rest after graduation or after the kids get older. Listen, there's always going to be another project. There's always going to be another goal. And at some point, if you don't stop and allow your mind and your body time to rest, your body is going to completely shut down on you, whether you're ready for it or not. So rest is a requirement. So write this down. Rest is not a reward for finishing everything. Rest is a requirement for sustaining everything, for sustaining anything. So let me repeat that again. Rest is not a reward for finishing everything. Rest is a requirement for sustaining anything. Okay. And then chronic fatigue, when it comes, like when chronic fatigue has gone on for weeks and months and even years, it can lead to serious health issues as well. And it goes back to the high blood pressure that I mentioned, risk of heart disease, your immune system takes a hit. So you no longer recover from illnesses, as quickly as you would have before. And then you have hormonal imbalances that may include, having trouble sleeping, low energy, loss of appetite. And again, talking about those mood changes where the people who you could have tolerated that additional hour has now got on your last, ooh, they just tiptoeing on it. So the bottom line is that mental fatigue can lead to so many issues if we don't recognize the signs. Your body will whisper before it screams. So at first that might look like, or present itself in the way of you being tired. And then you might have brain fog. Then that might lead to irritability, and then that to headaches. And then the headaches to sleep issues, and then the sleep issues to burnout. But the goal isn't to wait for the scream. The goal is to listen while it's still whispering. So I have two questions for you before I let you go. And the first question is, what symptoms have you normalized that are actually signs that you need rest? And then what has your mind, body, or spirit been trying to tell you that you've been too busy to hear? So maybe it's that, you do need more sleep, or that you need to set some boundaries, and boundaries are important. Um, I think, I told you guys a couple of weeks ago, or the last episode, that I finished a book on boundaries. I suggest you find one. If you're not good at setting boundaries, they are definitely a crucial part of life, and maintaining, your peace. So if you are not a good person at setting boundaries, then find you a book, invest in that, and make sure that you set some healthy boundaries. And then the last thing, or it could be trying to tell you, is that you just need a break from all the noise, right? So whatever it is, again, don't ignore the whisper. And the other thing that I want to do is I want to say thank you for spending time with me today. And until next time, keep growing, keep evolving, and remember that taking care of yourself is not a detour from the journey. It's part of how you make it to your destination. And then lastly, remember that you cannot continuously pour from a vessel that never gets refilled. And so I always ask this question to people, and that is, especially if they're givers, if you're a person that's constantly giving and giving and giving, like, who recharges the charger? Because sometimes it has to be you. So again, thank you so much for joining, and until next time.
Thank you for spending time here in the Queen's Court. I hope today's conversation gave you something to think about, reflect on, and maybe even move on. Make sure you subscribe, share, and download so you never miss a moment. And until next time, keep choosing yourself, keep walking in purpose, and keep showing up for the life you say you want.